In this series, Sovereigns or Vassals of Artificial Intelligence, we're going to lay out strategies to survive and thrive at a moment when many jobs and businesses are possibly not going to survive, and how you can be on the side of those who not only survive, but have the potential to thrive beyond their most ambitious dreams. In the previous video, we started with the need to see, because if we don't see what's happening, we can't act appropriately. We won't know exactly what we have to work with or precisely where we're headed, because the past is not a place one can go to. Whether we like the reality we're facing or dislike it is irrelevant to that reality, and reality is very cruel to those who don't respect it. In that video, we showed, with one of many examples, how one cannot see and judge at the same time. We could also consider that, according to transactional analysis theory, the part of the personality that judges is the parent, and the parent lives in the past. There's another situation that keeps us from seeing: mental models. If I ask, how many colors does the rainbow have? Almost everyone will answer 7, and they'll even agree on the names of each of those 7 colors. Why 7 and not 21? Possibly because that convention was established by a man. Women tend to notice many more subtle differences. Does it change the rainbow if we conceptually divide it into 7 chromatic segments or any other number? No. Reality doesn't care what we think of it. Does the way we divide it change our perception of the rainbow? Yes, and that's what matters for our purposes here. Seeing has always been a prerequisite for achieving goals, but never as much as now, when the world is changing so drastically and so fast, and we have to perceive it as freely as we can from our conventions, or at least using more than one model, not just a single one. The digital hurricane that swept away the world we knew. We currently live in an environment that is no longer one of accelerated change, but of an acceleration of the acceleration of a succession of every kind of change. Sustained winds of 12 miles per hour for 20 hours are not the same as sustained winds of 250 miles per hour for 1 hour. That's the difference between changing without noticing it and sweeping away those who weren't prepared. And 250 might be an insufficient comparison to reflect reality. We experience more change in a few years now than humanity once experienced in 100,000, as detailed below. The law of accelerating returns in human history is on full display, the one Raymond Kurzweil proposed before artificial intelligence became mainstream, which holds that technological progress grows exponentially because currently, 1. Each technological generation doesn't just add to the previous one, it accelerates the development of the next. 2. Discoveries build on each other. As there's more knowledge, more tools, and more capability, the speed of innovation increases. 3. The acceleration is cumulative. Since the more technology exists, the faster we can create new technology. The fact is that technological evolution keeps accelerating constantly. To illustrate that theory, a thought experiment has been proposed, citing a series of years that are surely not exact, nor do they need to be. It's the concept that matters. It goes like this. An ordinary person from 1750 who suddenly appeared in any modern city and saw humans climbing into eggs that hurtle along the ground at an unnatural speed, cars, or worse, through the air, airplanes. Who saw people pulling something that doesn't look like food out of a box to eat it, talking to stones, or apparently to thin air, and being answered by spirits, and then heard electronic music with no one visible producing it, would think everyone was bewitched. They wouldn't understand how heaven and hell could mix together. They would understand nothing, and they would not be able to adapt. It's proposed that for the same thing to happen in reverse, for someone arriving in 1750 to understand nothing, to not grasp that people communicated through strange drawings, letters on an unnatural surface, paper, their clothing, their settlements, and so on. You would have to go back to 12,000 BC, and for an equivalent leap before that, to the year 100,000 BC. The idea is that the amount of technological progress humanity achieved over 88,000 years was then achieved in 13,750 years, then the same amount again in 256 years. And if we follow that progression, the next evolutionary leap to a new species, socio-technologically speaking, would have already arrived this year, and the following period needed to develop a quantity of inventions comparable to those achieved over 88,000 years would conclude the year after. History isn't linear, granted, but the general trend, even accounting for periods of stagnation, closely resembles that sequence. It's possible the example didn't exaggerate at all, but actually fell short, since the eruption of artificial intelligence into everyone's work and life appears to mark a moment of singularity. The Big Bang moment of human society, equivalent to the singularity of a new universe coming into being, with new laws governing personal, social, economic, political, and international relationships. Is this an exaggeration? We'll soon find out. In the meantime, better safe than sorry. The possibilities of those left behind keep shrinking. The disruptive nature of this moment, the speed, breadth, and depth of the change, the fusion of digital, physical, and biological technologies, artificial intelligence, robotics, the Internet of Things, nanomaterials, robotic viruses, and so on, is creating a transformation deeper, faster, and more consequential than any previous industrial revolution. It's well documented that the statistical average on intelligence tests has to be recalibrated every few years, just so the population average keeps landing at 100, because the average value of measured intelligence rises every year. Populations that averaged 100 in 1950, when given the very same original test in 1980, scored an average of 110 or higher. Someone who would have scored 100 average a century ago would, by today's standards, score around 70, on the edge of intellectual disability. Likewise, someone who scores 100 today would have scored 130 a century ago, on the edge of genius. And had those tests existed in 1750, the gap would be substantially larger. This means that our imaginary person, transported to any modern city from 250 years in the past, however capable they were of navigating their original environment, would be intellectually disabled in the modern one, not merely scandalized but mentally unable to function. This evolution is a powerful argument for betting on technological development because the intellectual capacities of the population still allow for it. It's also a reason to join that development, to leave behind an obsolete education system and adapt education to today's possibilities, not only for what those who receive it might be able to do, but because whoever stalls actually falls behind, and a population of the intellectually disabled would be the ones conceiving and raising the next generations. Using artificial intelligence, whether directly or through someone hired to leverage it, doesn't guarantee evolving mentally at or above that rising average. Artificial intelligence can be used like a wheelchair to avoid having to walk, or like a vaulting pole to amplify one's mental capacities. One use leads to disability and incapacity. The other produces a mental athlete capable of winning the race to climb aboard the rocket of change. So it's urgent to understand and make use of these new possibilities, whether alone, in the isolation of someone with no one nearby to lean on, or as humanity has evolved to do until now, as a team. Either way, falling behind is neither a dignified nor an acceptable option. From idea to action, the sequence. Falling behind is neither a dignified nor an acceptable option. But there's a second trap, every bit as dangerous as the first, believing that in accelerated times, speed requires skipping the steps that lead to action. In a hurricane blowing at 250 miles per hour, the temptation is to run without direction. That's what people possessed by panic do. And possessed is exactly the right word here, because running without direction in the middle of a hurricane doesn't improve your odds of survival. It's the haste that, blinded by panic, bets your life on chance. Panic shows up in another form too, paralysis, which disguises itself in many ways to avoid looking like what it is, complaining about the state of the world, about how others aren't doing what they should, and one of its more sophisticated disguises, analysis paralysis. We can afford to live as though nothing were happening, but luxuries cost something, and at this moment in history, they cost more than ever. Every month of indecision is proportionally more expensive than a month of indecision was a decade ago. The answer to paralysis isn't improvisation, it's moving from understanding to action. There's a necessary sequence for optimizing outcomes, from idea to strategy, from strategy to plan, and from plan to action. Every link exists for a reason. An idea without a strategy is just enthusiasm. A strategy without a plan is just intention. A plan without action is just paper. An action without the three preceding steps might look like agility, but it's the reckless agility of someone running with their eyes closed, not knowing where they are or where they want to go. Here's the nuance. This is about thriving, not just about moving a lot. The sequence can be covered in years, in months, in days, or in minutes. What doesn't work is eliminating it, even though in certain cases it can look like that's exactly what's happening. Think of a fighter pilot. They decide in seconds the shape of an evasive maneuver or whether this target is the one and that one isn't. Seen from the outside, it looks like pure instinct, pure reaction, a total absence of analysis. It isn't. Every one of those split-second decisions is built on thousands of hours of simulator time, training, previous flights, mistakes already made and already corrected under controlled conditions. The pilot doesn't skip the sequence of seeing, deciding, planning, and acting. They have it so thoroughly internalized, so compressed through repetition, that they run through the whole thing in less time than it takes someone else to blink. Someone who has never flown and grabs those same controls can also decide fast, but their speed is the absence of the sequence, not its compression. The outcome of both decisions, made at the same chronological speed, couldn't be more different. This explains something that confuses a lot of people. Watching seasoned entrepreneurs, professionals, or other experts with a track record make a major decision in a 15-minute conversation, with no slide deck, no 20-page document, which seems to suggest that the method no longer applies, that experience or someone's aura of genius has replaced strategy and planning altogether, especially once the whole thing gets flattened into a movie about their life. What replaces the time spent analyzing isn't the absence of analysis. It's analysis already done in past situations, now available as instant recognition. It's reading a whole word at a glance instead of spelling it out letter by letter. Not because the alphabet got skipped, but because it was learned so well that it no longer registers as separate steps. The risk then isn't only in the person who gets paralyzed analyzing. It's also in the person who, without having covered that ground, imitates the speed of someone who has, and mistakes imitating the speed for having the expertise. The contrast between the two isn't between the careful one and the impulsive one. It's between responsible speed and irresponsible speed. And the difference between the two doesn't show up at the moment of deciding, it shows up months later in what each decision left behind. You can call it bad luck, if that makes the person dealing with the consequences feel better. But denying reality doesn't give you any control over it. It's worth keeping in mind that the best decision isn't the correct decision in every single case. Other factors come into play. But it remains true that the best decision is the one that turns out correct in the majority of cases. To illustrate that point, if someone could buy every single lottery ticket, they would win every single prize without exception. How much would they get back for every dollar invested? I don't know. Maybe 20 cents, maybe only 10. The number isn't what matters. The point is that buying lottery tickets is a bad decision, which doesn't change the fact that, in hindsight, we might still consider someone who bought a single ticket and won a prize to have made a good call. It's worth remembering this distinction for later, because it's going to come back, applied directly to the use of artificial intelligence in business. For those just beginning to build expertise on this ground, the freelancer, the entrepreneur building a business, the independent professional who doesn't yet have 1,000 hours of simulator time in this new industry, the practical takeaway isn't wait until you have experience to act. It's focus, see mentally through circumstances, alternatives and possibilities, walk the full sequence consciously and deliberately, precisely so that over time you can start compressing it the way someone who already has it internalized does. No one is born compressing the sequence. You earn that step by step until it stops feeling like steps. And although no one can think with someone else's mind, mirror neurons exist. Walking the path alongside others raises the quality of the work and lowers the toll it takes. The new competitor isn't a machine, it's someone who has nothing left to lose. The risk facing the freelancer, the independent professional, and the small business owner depends on the nature of the threat. The opportunity, equally, depends on the nature of that same reality. The calculation of risk or opportunity, in turn, depends on how that reality is perceived. That's true with or without artificial intelligence. What changes is that artificial intelligence can become a tool for perceiving better, for generating ideas, strategies, and plans. Let's get to the point. The perceived threat that artificial intelligence automates a task. The invisible threat, the one out of focus or not perceived at all. The person who lost their job to that automation. With mastery, with 15 years of experience, with a network already built, now competes for the same clients, with fewer fixed costs to cover and more urgency than ever to accept terms they would have rejected before. It's the case of the avalanche. One stone slipping pushes others, and each of those pushes still more. This isn't a death sentence for the freelancer or the small business owner. It's a redefinition of where competitive advantage lives. And this is where the sequence we've been discussing, idea, strategy, plan, action, whether walked in full or compressed according to each person's experience, stops being theory and becomes the difference between someone who uses artificial intelligence as a tool, whether directly or by partnering with someone else so they can stay focused on their own core work, and someone who gets displaced by someone who did use it. Supplier optimization. The idea of getting better terms from suppliers, or better products isn't new. What's new is that today a small business can compare within minutes the quality track record, prices, delivery times, and terms of dozens of suppliers, nearby or far away, in the same language or any other, something that previously only a large company with a dedicated purchasing department could do at that scale. The strategy shifts from using AI to fetch one isolated data point to structuring, with its help, alternative scenarios and the right strategy for each one. Deciding based on that which variables matter most for the business: consistency, reliability, price, lead time, quality, dependence on a single supplier. Let the tool run an enormous number of simulations, crossing every kind of variable along with their probabilities and correlations to produce pro forma results. Some that would have taken weeks to reach, others that simply weren't foreseeable before. Locating additional markets. A freelancer selling a service in a single city can, using data analysis available today, identify other areas where similar demand exists without adequate service, before investing in opening there. It might turn out that what's most worth scaling isn't the product they currently focus on, but rather the tool or skill behind it, or that the same product, reframed, has real potential in a different market. The difference between the one who thrives and the one who stays stuck is that one has a way to see and to turn data into plans with a budget, a timeline, and success criteria before acting, while the other doesn't see it, or if they do, they hear the data point and jump at the first idea that comes to mind with no route mapped out. Reducing inventory costs. Small businesses that for years decided how much to buy by feel or out of habit can now anticipate shifts in demand with a precision that used to belong only to large chains. Inventory models have been around for more than a century. What's been improving is computing power, and with it the number of variables and the complexity of the models that could be run, previously accessible only to those with the resources to keep staff and tools dedicated to that kind of optimization. Now, the cost of running those models dynamically, that is, using and adjusting them continuously as the market shifts, is within reach of almost anyone. The savings don't come from the tool alone. They come from folding that forecast into a purchasing strategy and a cash flow plan. The tool reflects, numerically, different realities under different circumstances. The plan decides what to do with that wider view. Detecting clients at risk of leaving. Nothing lowers customer acquisition cost like holding on to the clients you already have. Any business with recurring clients, an accounting firm, a salon, an auto shop, already holds in its own records the answer to who's about to walk away long before they actually do, Someone who used to come in every month and hasn't shown up in 3 didn't decide to leave all at once. They left a trail of signals first. The difference between the business that loses clients quietly and the one that keeps them isn't having more information. It's the same information it already had, read in time and turned into a phone call or an offer before the client finishes deciding to go elsewhere. Detecting new potential customers. Some businesses and products simply don't have enough of a market anywhere nearby, but they do once you widen the geography, once you cross enough patterns, once you go digging for correlations that nobody previously had the time or the tools to look for. This is exactly what Chris Anderson documented in The Long Tail 2006, niche markets that are each individually too small to justify anyone's attention, but that added together, through wider reach and better ways of connecting supply with demand, turn into a real business. Previously, only platforms with global scale, Amazon, Netflix, could exploit that long tail, because only they had the capacity to cross millions of data points to find the correlations linking a scattered buyer to a scattered product. Today, that same capacity to cross data is within reach of a small business. Looking into recurring complaints about products or services that seem at first glance unrelated to your own, but that reveal an unmet need you actually could serve, no longer requires a team of analysts. What it does require is the same sequence as always. The idea of looking there is worth nothing without the strategy of which correlations to chase, the plan for how to validate them before investing, and the action of testing them small before betting big. Quotes and proposals. Analyze, optimized, and personalized in minutes instead of hours. The independent professional who quotes every project by hand, tweaking the same template, sharpening the pencil, eyeballing the numbers based on the client, loses time they could be spending on finding the next client. Lack of perspective, lack of information, fatigue, and plain mistakes can lead just as easily to underpricing a project as to overpricing it. Either way, they lose. Today, it's possible to generate a first draft of a proposal tailored to both market conditions and the specific client's profile and needs in the time it used to take just to open the document. The professional still decides and adjusts. The tool doesn't replace judgment. It adds information and compresses the time between the idea and the document the client receives. Monitoring competitor prices without chasing them by hand. Going through competitors' models, prices, and terms one by one, visiting their sites, taking notes, comparing, is exactly the kind of repetitive task a small business never has the time to keep up with consistently, which is why it's so hard to do it on an ongoing basis. Whoever automates that monitoring gets the same quality of information without needing the department that used to be required to maintain it. Analysis of current or potential competitors. SWOT comparisons, strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats that can lead to decisions to expand, reinforce, pivot, or pursue alliances with businesses that go from being competitors to being complementary. Cash flow forecasting. Cash is just another form of inventory, one everyone holds and whose cost can be optimized. The data offers up patterns, statistics, and correlations, showing which hours, days, and months tend to run tight and which run loose. What counts as adequate reserves at one point can turn scarce the next and excessive the one after that. Both mismatches carry their own additional costs. Turning that history into a forecast doesn't eliminate uncertainty, but it lowers the risk and makes it manageable. Knowing in advance which stretch is going to be tight lets you negotiate a payment term, delay a sale, or do whatever's needed, instead of improvising once the account is already in the red. Reclaiming the scarcest asset, focus time. There's a category of tasks that generates no competitive advantage, produces no income, and yet eats up a disproportionate share of a small business's time. Tax filings, social security paperwork, tax returns, banking portals seemingly designed so no one can get through them without help. This isn't work that grows the business. It's the toll you have to pay just to keep the business legally alive, and that toll is paid in the most expensive currency there is, the owner's own focused time, exactly the time they need to think about strategy, about clients, about whatever actually moves the needle. Today, it's possible to have an assistant calculate the figures, fill out the forms, navigate those confusing portals, and pinpoint exactly where and how to file each procedure, leaving everything ready so the person responsible only has to take the very last step, entering their card number or their confirmation code. That boundary isn't a minor detail, it's exactly where it needs to be. The tool prepares, the person authorizes. Whoever signs, whoever pays, whoever is accountable to the authorities is still the business owner, never the tool. But all the work that came before, the hours or whole days it used to swallow month after month, is already done. This case doesn't buy a better decision like the ones before it. It buys the time needed to make one. Every hour that doesn't go into a form is an hour that can go into the full sequence instead. Seeing, thinking through strategy, building the plan, acting on the business itself, which is, in the end, the only reason that paperwork existed in the first place. B2, and 1,000 cases more, which sounds like etc., meaning we don't have the capacity or the interest to keep going on the subject. But if we don't keep going, we don't see. And if we don't see, we neither benefit nor protect ourselves. This isn't a flaw of those who work alone. It's what happens to anyone who works alone. Whoever acts in isolation sees with only one pair of eyes, and one pair of eyes, however well trained, has blind spots that will never announce their own absence. Because by definition, what isn't seen doesn't send a notice that it's missing. One example will do, drawn from the writing of this very article. The section the reader is going through right now was first published without it. Not because the knowledge to write it was missing, but because working alone, its absence simply wasn't seen until it surfaced thanks to someone else. It isn't knowledge that protects against that blind spot. It's having more pairs of eyes looking from a different angle. That's one of the reasons behind the need to build communities of like-minded people with shared interests. To enjoy life, we get to have the company of friends who like the same sport, the same concerts, the same theater. But to reach the standard of living that makes those other pleasures possible, we need to build community with the best minds focused on the same economic development interest. Not just because others know something we don't, but so that someone else can see what we don't. Many of us can translate B2C, B2B, and perhaps B2G into commercial sales and relationships. They stand for B2C, business to client, B2B, business to business, and B2G, business to government, G, where the number 2 is written in place of 2 because they sound alike. Analyzing the distinctive traits of each of those categories leads to new strategies and new kinds of support powered by artificial intelligence, but there's more. Y Combinator, the best known startup incubator and accelerator in the world, has started explicitly naming a new category within its latest generations of startups. B2A, business to agent, that is business to AI agent. The definition the industry itself is using is precise. Agents described as autonomous software systems, capable of executing multi-step tasks, making purchasing decisions, and operating as economic actors in their own right. This isn't an automated task. It's a non-human customer with its own capacity to decide and to pay. That has given rise to an entire category of businesses serving that customer. Some sell the same things that have always been sold: phone numbers, payments, identity, just structured differently, built for someone on the other end who isn't a person but an agent. Others sell something entirely new: memory, sandbox testing environments, insurance specifically designed to cover the risks of an AI agent acting on someone's behalf. In both cases, they treat the agent as what it already is, a new kind of customer with its own needs that neither business to business nor business to government ever had to serve before. And the list goes on. Also underway is the gradual replacement of SaaS businesses, software as a service, with services built directly on artificial intelligence, where what used to be a tool a person operated becomes an agent that operates the entire task. And once again, 1,000 cases more. The pattern is the same in every case. Artificial intelligence doesn't replace the sequence from idea to action, it speeds it up, as long as the sequence exists in the first place. Whoever uses it without strategy or a plan gets speed without direction. It's the same bad decision as buying lottery tickets, just faster now. Whoever uses it within the sequence gets what actually changes the game. Capabilities that used to cost an entire payroll, now available to a one-person business, one that, if it doesn't want to or can't keep up, doesn't even have to get distracted by the constant flood of new features, new capabilities, new costs, and every kind of news and change showing up more and more often around artificial intelligence. The old rule still applies. There's strength in numbers. The question is no longer whether artificial intelligence is going to transform your industry. That part has already been answered. The real difference is between those who steer their life's project proactively, better than ever before, and those who compete reactively with shrinking margins by the day. The same changes let some people enjoy sailing in a blue ocean, while others find themselves stuck fighting in a red one. A reference to the concept developed by W. Chan Kim and René Mauborgne in Blue Ocean Strategy, 2005. The red ocean is the space of existing markets, where competitors wear each other down, fighting over the same territory until it runs red. The blue ocean is the space of new territory, free of that direct competition, created rather than fought over. Change is not optional, only its shape still is. Helping build that shape is exactly the work we do together in the consulting cohorts. I'm Dr. Engineer Alfredo Alonso. Change is not optional. Until next time.